Hello, and welcome back to another episode of General Conference Conversations, a podcast where we have conversations about General Conference. I'm your host, Kaylin, and I'm super excited to talk about this talk today. I really enjoyed this talk. Of course, as always, I have many thoughts on it, but I did really overall enjoy it. It's a really good one. So, of course, this is the second to last talk for this conference. So the next one you hear will be like day before General Conference, which is insane. And we'll be going over President Nelson's, I think, Celestial next time. So, but today we're talking about We Are His Children by Elder Giraud-Carrier. I'm sure I said that wrong because I'm pretty sure he's French. So, I am so sorry. I do not speak French. But, as always, definitely check this out, read it, watch it, listen to it before you come in, listen to this episode, so you can get your own thoughts and have your own feels about it before I add to it. So, there's quite a bit in here. There's a lot of stories in here. And so I'm not going to, recap all the stories, but kind of pick out the little things here and there that I thought were really good. So he starts out talking about the prophet Samuel, and the Lord sent him to Jesse's house to anoint the new king of Israel. And Samuel saw Eliab, Jesse's firstborn, and he jumped to conclusions of, oh, this is the guy, definitely, because he's tall and he looks like a leader. And the Lord's like, no, don't look on his countenance or height, look upon his heart. And he tells the next story of Ananias. The Lord sent to bless Saul, and Saul had a reputation, and Ananias heard about it, and he jumped again to conclusions. And of course, the Lord again kind of chastised him of, this is not who you think he is. Stop listening to other people. And he sums up these stories in a pretty good way. He says, what was the trouble with Samuel and Ananias in these two instances? They saw with their eyes and heard with their ears, and as a result, they passed judgment on others based on appearance and hearsay. And I thought, such a succinct way to say that, right? They heard with their ears, they saw with their eyes, and they passed judgments based on appearance and hearsay. And I mean, how many times do we do that, right? I'm not saying this is strictly a bad thing, right? And I'll get into, this is part of the reason I loved this talk, but also was like, I don't completely agree with, not completely agree, but there is more to point out here. One of the things I want to point out is it is very human to kind of make, I don't want to say snap judgments because it has a negative connotation, but we have impressions, right? We meet somebody for the first time, we have an impression of them, positive or negative, neutral, right? We might be like, oh, they look like they look like they work in a coffee shop, right? For example, I don't think I've ever looked at somebody and thought they worked in a coffee shop, but as an example, that's the first thing that popped in my head. And that's not strictly a bad thing, right? Especially when we are assessing quote unquote danger. When we see someone and our brains think they look dangerous, it's a way of protecting ourselves. And on a more kind of neutral level, we're assessing someone for how we're going to get along with them, what we might have in common, how we can interact, right? If we look over them and we notice that they have a cross, that they're wearing a cross, and then we're going to say, oh, they must be Christian. I'm Christian. Let's talk about Christianity. They might not be Christian, they might just wear a cross, right? It might have been their grandmothers and they don't, go to church at all, but we're using our impressions and the connections that our brain's making to connect with people. And so it's not always a bad thing, right? Labels are not always a bad thing. What Elder Giraud is kind of getting into in his talk, right, is when we put labels for ourselves and labels on other people above the importance of them as a person. And I definitely think we do this, right? We say, oh, you're atheist. And we can never be friends because you're an atheist and I'm a Christian, and that's just never going to work. Even if you get along with that person absolutely perfectly, we're putting that label, right, above our friendship, above them as a person, right? They might be an atheist, but that's not the only thing that they are. Just as, like, I'm not only a woman, I am also, I am a wife, I am a sister, I am a project manager's assistant at the moment, project admin. I am a reader, I'm a writer, I am a lover of movies. Like, I have a lot of labels, right, that put all those together make up me as a person. And of course, Elder Giraud is also making the argument of, like, the most important quote-unquote label, not label, but like identity, is that we are children of God. And of course, that's his whole talk title, is that we are his children. And so he gives some examples of scripture stories, like when the scribes and Pharisees saw the woman taken in adultery, they saw a depraved woman who was a sinner worthy of death, but Christ saw someone who had been tempted and succumbed to the weakness of humanity, but that could be, forgiven and redeemed. He gives a couple different things, but the man sick with palsy, and the woman with an issue of blood, that they were all judged by the people around Christ, even his own disciples sometimes, because of what they saw, or because of what they knew about this person, or they thought they knew about this person, right? What they'd heard about them. But the Lord sees our heart, and sees our intention, and sees what we're trying to do and the effort that we're putting in. And so someone may look at me and think, man, she's not trying at all. But the Lord knows that I am. Or maybe he knows that I'm not, right? But we can't look at somebody and say they're not doing enough, or they're doing things wrong, right? So he tells a story about his wife. She got a ministering assignment to an elderly widow in the ward who had a lot of health challenges, and she was in a really rough spot mentally. She was kind of isolated, and she did not want visitors. And she said, there's nothing I can do for anybody. I don't want you here. And his wife's like, yeah, there is something you can do. You can come, you can let us come and visit you and serve you. And so she went every day. And she went very regularly, right? And a bit later, the sister had surgery on her feet, and her bandages had to be changed every day. And so his wife would go every day and wash her feet and change her band-aids. And he talks about, like, many, many times his wife's ability to do this, to see people as God sees them. And he says this: economic status, skin color, cultural background, nationality, degree of righteousness, social standing, or any other identifier or label is of no consequence to her. She sees with her heart. She sees the child of God in everyone. And so I really love this concept, right, of course, of, like, your sins don't matter. Like, what you've done doesn't matter. The negative parts of who you are don't matter, right? What makes us different doesn't matter. It's what makes us the same. But also, again, I want to kind of add this in here, right? We're going to see with our heart. We're seeing this person as a human being first, rather than their skin tone or their ethnicity or the language that they speak, right? But like, see with our heart, but learn with everything else. I think this is sometimes can go too far as to say, like, but the things that you find important about yourself don't matter at all, right? And so it can be hard to be like, oh, well, it's okay, I don't see your culture, I just see you as a person. Well, my culture is really important to me, right? And so, like, we can also celebrate our diversities, celebrate our differences. See with our heart first, see them as a child of God first, and then learn about what makes them different. And I think you'll be surprised at what you learn, at what you love, about how easy it is to, like, there's a quote, and I'm not gonna know who said it, I'll put it in the show notes, but it goes something like, it's hard to hate people up close. And it is. When you know someone, when you are with them constantly, when you are, you know, seeing their life, seeing their struggles, and learning about their past, it's really hard to hate them. You might still be annoyed, right? You're not going to get along with everybody. You don't have to, like, love everybody and want to spend every waking moment with everybody, because you're going to be, you know, there are people that you're not going to get along with. There are people that are in different ways that just aren't going to mesh. But it's really hard to, like, have actual, like, hatred and prejudice for someone that you spend time with and actually get to know. So, on that line, here's your question. It's, how does your perspective of someone change when you see them first as a child of God? And have you had experiences with that, right? Like, have you stepped back and reminded yourself, this person is a child of God? And how has that changed? Or have you made conscious effort to, like, you know, especially someone that you disagree with or don't get along with or whatever, right? Or that, I don't know, even, like, people that you do know really well, even if it's your spouse or your child or you're a family member, a parent that, you know, you're struggling with, how can that change? How can your struggle with that person change when thinking about them as a child of God? So, think about that, ponder about that. So, he quotes President Nelson a couple times. He also quotes C.S. Lewis, and how he's had experiences in his family of how the gospel has been a great way to bring people together. And in closing, he recites I'll Walk With You, the children's song, which I just loved. It's one of my favorite primary songs ever. It's so good. And at the very end, he shares his testimony, and then he kind of gives an invitation and also, like, a wish, a prayer. He says, I pray that, like him, we may love others because that is the right thing to do, not because we are doing the right thing or fitting the right mold. Sorry, not because, oh my gosh, I'm having a rough time reading today. Let me start over. I pray that, like him, we may love others because that is the right thing to do, not because they are doing the right thing or fitting the right mold. And I think that's so important, right? We don't love someone because they did it right. or because they follow all the rules, or because they look the way we want them to look. We love them because they're a child of God, because they're worth loving. Everyone is worth loving. So, that's all I've got for you. Again, definitely check out the footnotes on this talk, and ponder that question. How does your perspective of someone change when you see them first as a child of God? But thank you so much for listening or watching. As always, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. And I love to hear from you. So emails, messages, reviews, comments, all of them. Send them my way, and I'll talk to you next time.